show features Lucy Angel, co-founder of Grocery Run Club. I am so excited to be sitting here with Lucy Angel, co-founder of Grocery Run Club and a woman of many talents. You do so many different things, so I can't wait to talk about all of that. But Lucy, thank you so much for joining the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Before we get into your story and everything else that I want to talk to you about, I want to start by who is a One Girl Revolution in your own life? Who's a woman or a girl that inspires you?
This one's really easy for me. It's my mom. My mom is my rock, and I think that as you get older, you get a different appreciation for your mom and all the things that your parents have gone through as their own individual person. My parents were born and raised in Mexico. My mom came to America when she was 14 years old, and I think so much about the struggles that we go through, that I go through on a day-to-day, and I think about how my mom went through that tenfold because she was newly arrived to this country that she didn't know, that she wasn't sure how long she was going to stay here. She didn't know the language, and I feel like every time I think about her story and I think about the hardships that I'm going through, I'm like, it is nothing compared to what my mom went through. So she keeps me going all the time.
That's awesome. So what was that like being first generation? I know that everybody's experience is so different, but what was it like growing up? And can you just tell me a little bit about your life growing up and your life until now, I guess?
Yeah. I'm born and raised in Chicago. And my parents, once they moved here, they stayed here. And so I have a couple of siblings, and I think even just the age range of how separate we are has given us such a different experience. But for me, I had such a happy upbringing, and I grew up in a very Mexican community on the west side of the city. And so I was very in touch with my culture. And I think, as I got older, I kind of started to realize these inequities that happen of being a person of color that I just hadn't really experienced when I was little because I was surrounded by people that looked like me. And I think as I got older, I started to realize there's just so many, first off, a variety of different types of people that we interact with, and our city is so diverse, but however, it's one of the most segregated cities in the world. And so you kind of get that and you start to understand that as you get older. But I think for me, being first generation was such a blessing. I always say that being first generation is unlike any other type of experience. You get to pull the best of all the worlds that you want to pull from. I think it also comes with a lot of hardships and difficulties of kind of deciding where you fit in and where you don't. There's definitely been times when I have felt not Mexican enough, where I have felt not American enough. But at the end of the day, I think that drives so much of what I do, not just in my day-to-day, but how I communicate that through work and now through Grocery Run Club.
So going from that, your upbringing, how did you end up getting into events? Because I want to talk about your events company, Loose Ends. Yeah. Talk about that.
Yeah, so my background is in the hospitality industry. I worked from a host to an event person, and I kind of fell in love with events there. And it was really such a magical thing to kind of bring people together around food. And the chef that I worked with, Stephanie Izard, she's a really big chef. And so I had so much opportunity to be able to travel with her, to be able to kind of get a better lay of the land of how events operated once brands were involved and things like that. And so after I left the hospitality industry, I kind of pivoted into doing events on a freelance basis, and it just kind of catapulted into a full business on its own. So obviously the last year was really, really difficult for not just myself, but everyone in the events industry, whether that's, marketing and brand work or weddings and things like that. It really wasn't a complete shutdown of all of our industry. And so I'm excited that it's kind of returning now.
Yeah,
for sure.
So prior to the pandemic, what types of events were you doing, and kind of talk me through some of that?
Yeah, I work with such a range of clients. I work with nonprofits, which is really great. A lot of local nonprofits that now have, now that I have Grocery Run Club, I have such a different perspective of how I work with them. And then I also worked with large brands. So anyone from Soho House to Pitchfork doing music festivals. So it could be anything from, a 10-person dinner to a 10,000-person music festival. And so it's such a range that, falls into the event category. And I feel so lucky to be able to bring a brand's perspective to life and their goals, but also be able to do the same thing for a nonprofit that's fundraising and trying to get their mission across.
Yeah. Well, and then Grocery Run Club sort of sparked out of your experience in the hospitality
Yeah.
industry, and then the pandemic hits. And talk to me about like when COVID hit, because everybody obviously has their own experience. Like
Yeah.
when COVID hit, things that were going through your mind, I'm sure that you were probably freaking out because you
I had
didn't
a lot
know.
of freak out days.
I still have freak out days sometimes,
Yeah.
but talk to me about like the beginning stages of COVID and then like how Grocery Run Club, how that idea came.
Yeah, it's so funny thinking about like where I was mentally at the start of the pandemic because I had my entire year planned out. I was booked until the end of 2020. And my clients were starting to ask, what's going on with the pandemic? How are we going to pivot this? And I thought it was going to be gone in 2 weeks. And so it's so
Everybody
insane
did.
to think about the ways in which I was so uninformed. I think all of us were uninformed about how this would transpire, but it was a really difficult couple of months to essentially accept that everything was out of my control. There was nothing that I could do besides sit and wait. And I think, in the moment, it was such a self-centered way of thinking of like, my business is going down. We don't know when we're going to bounce back from this. And kind of to have to hold my clients a variety, as I just mentioned, like such a variety of them through what the next steps were and understanding there was money that was going to be lost and all of that. So it was a really dark time. I would be lying if I said that it didn't. And even the months following it was kind of thinking about this bounce back. There were a couple of clients of mine that were like, well, let's just plan for something for December. And it's like, we don't know where we're going to be in December. But I think like the more and more I sat with myself of realizing that that wasn't something that I could control, I really did kind of change my perspective to try and figure out what it was that I could. And I think, just being from the city and understanding the many inequities that happen, I knew that we heard it all over the news. There were communities that were experiencing the pandemic in a way disproportionate way. And so I think my partner Jorge and I just really started to think about what could we do? Do we feel comfortable leaving our house? Do we want to go volunteer somewhere? And it was still such a scary time to even think about leaving your house. And both of our parents live in the city. They're dependent, we take care of them. And so to think about something happening to us and then not being able to see our parents and, they depend on us for that way. So we really weren't sure what we could do. But once we saw the need that was going on, specifically on the south and west sides of the city where predominantly Black and brown folks live, we were like, we have to do something. And so we weren't sure exactly what it was, but we knew that the thing we were running into was a lot of organizations were in need of support. They were in need of volunteers, they were in need of resources, they were in need of funds. And so we were like, why don't we get our group of friends together and try and do something? And so the first iteration of Grocery Run Club was literally that. We asked 20 of our friends if they would send us $5 on Venmo, and we would go on a grocery run for an organization that we were supporting. And our friends sent us triple that amount. And so we were like, okay, I think we're onto something, or maybe our friends are really nice. And our friends really encouraged us to go for it. They were like, what would it look like if you asked a larger pool of people to send you money and you would go do grocery runs? And that was kind of how it started.
That's so cool. I think that so many people throughout the pandemic, like at the beginning, you kind of look at yourself and you're like, how do I survive this? And then how do I survive with my family? How do I take care of them during this pandemic? Especially because we didn't know how long it was going to last.
Right.
And even now, it's like we don't really know what the future holds. But then I think people started looking at the people around them and saying, okay, what can I do to support others? But there were so many people that didn't know how to. They wanted to do something, but they didn't know how to support people. And so you tapped into that, which is incredible.
We did, and it was not something, this is not a space that I think Jorge and I ever thought that we would be in. We never thought that we would be operating a nonprofit, let alone would have started in the middle of a pandemic and that it would have turned into what it's turned into over the last couple of months. But to your point, like, you're so right. There were so many people that reached out to us that said exactly that. I wasn't sure how I could help, but this is how I want to help. And there were so many ways for us to encourage people to help, whether they could give us financial resources for us to go and shop for organizations, but it was also us being able to amplify the work that other orgs were doing, whether they needed their own set of volunteers, and for us to be able to kind of serve as the middle person between what the org needed and the people that wanted to help. And so I do think that that's the space that we hold even right now as Grocery Run Club of being this middle person.
So for people that are listening, what is Grocery Run Club?
Yeah. So Grocery Run Club is a nonprofit. It's a community-driven organization that really focuses on providing resources, whether that may be food, personal hygiene products, cleaning supplies, to folks in areas that are underserved. So for us, that really does mean predominantly the South and West sides, but we really go wherever the need is within the city of Chicago. And so at first when we started, we were like, we're going to get food to everyone. Everyone needs to have fresh produce. And we could quickly realize that some of that need was in other ways. It was in cleaning supplies, especially at the height of the pandemic when no one could find Lysol, no one could find hand sanitizer. We were able to kind of figure out how we could outsource that in bulk to get it to people. So we really like to be as flexible as people need us to be in terms of what we're providing, but it is at the core of essential needs.
So I love stories. Obviously, One Girl Revolution is all about stories. I would love to hear a couple of stories of maybe experiences that you had through Grocery Run Club or people that you were able to serve or help. I'd love to hear a couple of those.
We have so many. There's a lot of joyous ones. And for every joyous one, there's 10 heartbreaking ones. And we try not to focus on those because it's really easy to fixate on all the things that are going wrong. But I think the thing that we've realized of all of those heartbreak moments is that all of these folks that are experiencing the significant need during the pandemic, they're people just like us. They're people that at some scenario maybe made a wrong move in their life, or life hit them really hard and they weren't able to get back up. And a lot of the people that we service are undocumented immigrants that were not able to get relief through the federal government, that are now, that are here by themselves, don't have any family. Like, I think it's really hard for people to imagine who is this person that needs help, that can't call their friends, can't call their family. There's so many of them, and they have children. But I think for us, the parts that have been really joyous is meeting folks, and especially children, who kind of are now learning about these new resources that they can have access to. So one of the organizations that we support has a community garden in North Lawndale, and we were there all summer distributing food to neighbors that needed food, that were experiencing food insecurity. But as we were there, we had a lot of children that came into the garden to see what was growing. And I think for a community that doesn't have a grocery store within walking distance of them where they can get fresh produce, to see something fresh grow in that garden was like a mind-blown moment for them. And we had so many instances where the kids that were there were trying a food for the first time in front of us, like eating a fresh tomato off of the vine. And that's really informed the ways in which we're moving forward with Grocery Run Club and incorporating this educational aspect, because there are so many kids that, right now we're focusing on servicing their parent, but we really need to be there for them as well.
There are so many reasons that I wanted to have you on the podcast to share about Grocery Run Club, but you just talked about so many different people. And I think a lot of times we kind of get in our own little silo. We live in our own little community. We don't pay attention to people around us, but there are so many people that we don't see that need help. And so I think it's so important for us to look outside the box and find ways that we can serve, yes, our local community, but also are there, people that don't have resources that we have. And when the pandemic hit, I kept thinking so much about children, whether it's children of those who are undocumented or children whose parents struggle with addiction or something else. And those kids, a lot of times they would go to school and they'd be fed at school. And then what happens when kids aren't going to school? And so there are so many different people that we may not see that have huge needs. And so I just encourage everybody through this podcast, and I want to encourage everybody now to look outside of your own little silo.
Right. And I think that there is a preconceived notion of what the person that needs help looks like. And that is so far away from what it is. And some people are so prideful of who they are that they don't want to seek assistance. And it tricks you, the person who could potentially help them, to think that they're totally fine and they're not. And so I think that that's a stigma that we really try to break, of understanding who's the person that needs help. They don't look like what they look like in your mind, and there is not one experience that everyone's going through that got them to this point of needing help. And sometimes they're your neighbor, like you could be living in a place where you're like, no one around me needs help, but it might be the closest person to you that might need help. That's been something that's been really at the core of trying to share that with people, of just like, your neighbor may need help, so ask them what they need. And I think it's really difficult for people to kind of break that mindset.
It's so important to talk about that. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing. So I want to know, like, is there a person that you've encountered that through Grocery Run Club? Is there, I know you shared a little bit of like some of the stories, but like, is there a specific story, a person with a name that was helped through Grocery Run Club that you might be able to share?
There are so many people that we've met. There's a woman that lives in the Austin neighborhood. Her name is Esther, and she would come to talk to us every time that we would fill this free market at the corner of her block. And we got to know so much of her story, of understanding like how that neighborhood got to where it is, what resources were there before that don't exist now, why is there, this epidemic happening in their community as it pertains to drugs and all of that. And those are things that we never would have known about the neighborhood had we not talked to someone who lived there. And I think that's so much of what we do at Grocery Run Club. We know we're not the experts of every neighborhood, and there's 77 of them in the city. And I grew up in one of them, Jorge grew up in another one, we live in another one. So, and we're not the experts of those either. And so much of what we do is to partner with organizations that are in those communities so they can come back to us and tell us exactly what they need. And we find so much of that information, all of it, if not from the community member. And so when we have the opportunity and privilege to learn from a community member, we soak it all in, because no one knows their neighborhood better than them. And we meet people like that at every turn, of people that just want to share what they have experienced in that neighborhood, or why they are coming to meet us in this moment of need, and better understanding like what their exact needs are, because we can assume what people's needs are, just in the same way that when we started we were like, everyone needs fresh produce, and then you find out that that's not the case. So there's a lot of people like that we've met that are just really, really bring that personal human touch to what we're doing, because we're on the ground every day doing what we're doing.
Yeah. And I'm going to be so intrigued to see how what you're doing continues to grow, but also how it continues to grow this network. Because I'm sure that the people that you've been able to help, they're going to find ways to help their neighbor, or maybe they don't have a job right now. I think there were so many people that, so many people lost their jobs, or their small businesses were shut down, or had to shut down for an entire year. So they were struggling. People were struggling in so many different ways, like you had said. But I'm going to be so intrigued to see how the people that you've served and the people that you've been able to work with, how they're going to pay it forward for somebody else, because that's how so many things are happening now.
We've already seen it in some respects. We have a community member. We do a weekly delivery on Saturdays. We used to do the distribution at that garden that I mentioned, and then once we realized, okay, it's going to start snowing soon, it's going to get really rough, we pivoted to a home delivery service. And so we have 9 to 10 volunteers every Saturday who come and pick up 10 boxes of produce and go deliver door to door to our families. And we had a community member that reached back out to us and said, I'm actually in a better place than I was when you met me, and I now want to drive and deliver to families. And so those are things that we're super excited to see, and that we hope that the resources that we're providing get people to a better place as time goes on, for sure.
How do people get connected with you, or like how do you find the people that you're delivering food to?
Yeah, that all comes from our community organizations that we partner with. So since the start of July, when we started Grocery Run Club, we've worked with over 20 organizations.
That's great.
And what that really does is it allows us to move in such an immediate way, because in any other scenario, we would need to go to a neighborhood, do a survey, understand what the member needs, and then react. Whereas here we can go straight to an organization that we have a relationship with, or build a relationship with, and say, tell us what you need. And then we can turn around and get it that much quicker. And our goal is to be a longstanding lifeline. So if we start working with you as a partner org, we want to continue working with you indefinitely until hopefully we get out of this immediate need. But it is something that we're seeing, that the need of the community members may be lessening slightly, but it is still something that's going to be there even post-pandemic. It was there pre-pandemic,
right? And
it's going to continue on. And so we're thinking about the ways in which we're sustainably showing up for people, so that they know that they can count on us to be there for them and their community.
Yeah, that's it. Is so many people were in need before the pandemic, and I hope everybody who's listening that they continue to find ways to support other people, and especially, once your job comes back or
Right.
once you get that paycheck, that you can find ways to support others.
Exactly. And we found so many people that did so much for us with nothing. We had so many of our friends in the hospitality industry that were unemployed that were like, put me to work. What do you want me to do? And so I'm hopeful that once folks get back into their normal groove, that they don't forget that there's still a need and there's a way that we are responsible for responding.
Yeah. So I'm big into dreaming, like big dreams, whatever, like money is not a question. What is your big dream for Grocery Run Club, thinking about it, 5 or 10 years down the line?
It's so hard for us to think like so far away because everything happens so fast. Like we're not even at a year.
Crazy. You've accomplished so much.
It definitely, like, I'm very proud of the ways in which we've been able to move quickly because of the support of everyone. For us right now, we're really focusing on this educational and community development aspect. So we have our 3 pillars, which are that education, community development, and immediate impact. So much of what we've been doing is immediate impact. And now we're trying to pivot into doing this longer term education and community development. So that community garden that I mentioned, we're actually revamping it so that it's able to produce 3 times the amount of food for the community.
Awesome.
And to be able to allow for community members to come into the garden and be able to learn more about how to grow their own food. And so we're trying to take that model and really replicate it all around the city. There are a lot of community gardens in the city, but the majority of them are on the north side of the city. And the know-how lives there as well. And so we're really trying to bring those resources of folks that have urban gardened in those areas to come and show that skill to another community. And so we're trying to incorporate those throughout the city, but also to incorporate other things that folks in that area may not have access to, whether that's like different types of sports, like skateboarding. Like, what would it look like if there was a community garden that also was attached to a skate park? And so those are kind of the ways in which we're innovatively thinking about how to bring a different experience to the communities that right now don't have that.
That's awesome. And what about your event business? What's your big dream for that?
To hire more people. It's really interesting because the event world is still kind of in this gray area.
Right.
I love where I'm at with my business, but I am, like, now that I'm juggling these 2 things, I'm very much getting to my bandwidth. So I'm excited to bring someone onto my team to be able to help me grow that aspect. But I think right now it's, figuring out that merge of what I'm doing. Like, I was already working with nonprofits before, but now I see that as an even more urgent need of being able to tell someone's story and the amazing work that they're doing, allowing them to raise funds to be able to put that back into the initiatives that they're doing and continue that work. So much of what nonprofits do is based on who's willing to give them funds. And a lot of good work dies that way because people are unwilling to part with their dollars or to see the value in what they're doing. Grocery Run Club, definitely, we wanted to position it in a way that you wanted to be part of it. Our branding tells you that story. We didn't want to be a stuffy nonprofit. We are very, very young in comparison to some of the people that we talk to in other nonprofits. And so right now it's kind of finding that merge of how can we continue to tell the stories of marginalized communities, which is a big part of what I do through my business, and working with Black and Brown people on bringing their events together and telling their narrative. That's exactly what we're doing with Grocery Run Club in one way. And so bridging those is something that I'm really excited, kind of thinking forward of me as Lucy being a part of both of these worlds.
Yeah, I see so much synergy between both
There
things.
is, yeah.
And I'm sure it's going to become even more clear the further you come, like your events start coming back into play, and then you continue to do Grocery Run Club. And I'm sure that you're going to find even more ways where you can create that synergy too.
Yeah, I mean, it's so insane to us to think that we have not met our community that supports us because we haven't had the opportunity to have them together. Right now we have 400 monthly donors that we have not been able to say thank you to in person, where normally we would have a gala or a fundraiser. And so we're thinking of how we can create that in-person experience in a way that's safe, which it just makes me put my event hat on, and we're thinking about just like how it continues to tie into our mission. So right now we're working on our run club because everyone has asked us like, your name's Grocery Run Club, so when's the run club happening? And so we're working into tying that in so that we do have, this well-rounded idea of how our donor can be involved with our mission on a financial basis, on a volunteer basis, but also at the core of what we're trying to do, which is exploring health and wellness in areas that don't have access to that. So I'm excited. I'm really excited to, again, like put my hat on both ends and make something work.
That's so cool. So for somebody who's listening, I know that a lot of people have great ideas. They talk about how everybody's had a world-changing idea throughout their life. For somebody who's listening, what advice would you give to them? Because I know in some ways you sort of stumbled into Grocery Run Club.
Yeah.
But if somebody has an idea or they see a need and they want to make a difference, what would you say to them?
To go for it, to just do it. I think so many of us are scared to fail that it keeps us from maybe seeing through our best ideas or ideas that are going to help someone else. And I think our insecurity holds us back all the time, but there's nothing wrong if you fail. You just move on. You charge it to the game and say it didn't work out and you move on. And I think I hear so many people share ideas that are incredible that just either don't know where to start, don't feel confident enough to start, wonder what will happen if it does or doesn't take off. And so I think if all of us just kind of found what it is that you're interested in, how you think you can help, specifically for, the work that we're doing at Grocery Run Club, it was never meant to turn into something bigger. It was just, what can we do in this moment to help the need that we're seeing and that our communities are experiencing. And I think when it comes from such an authentic, genuine place, it's really hard for people to not see that. So that would be my biggest recommendation. That goes for business as well. Like if you are so passionate about it, just go for it.
And you never know maybe it doesn't become the thing that you set out to become. And even I know you started this event business and then never in a million years probably would you have thought that Grocery Run Club would become a thing, but
never.
Then the pandemic hits. And so sometimes even if you jump off and you do one thing, it might transform into something else. Or even if you quote unquote fail, it might turn into a success somewhere else. So I love that.
Yeah, I think we're more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. And I think that maybe when we set out on business ideas, it's like it has to go this way, otherwise it's not working out. And that's usually not how it happens. We all have to pivot, in business and nonprofit and all of that to meet the need that we're experiencing. And I've experienced that in my business as well, thinking that, the market was somewhere and then me realizing that it lived somewhere else and that I could change what I was doing to meet that. We can all do that. We can all be flexible and we don't have to label it as a failure, but label it as a pivot.
Right.
The keyword of 2020 and 2021.
Or innovate.
Innovate around that. But I do hope that people just kind of, figure out what their place is in that. And I think there's a lot of people that also think they have to be the leader of that and that, if they're not the owner or if they didn't think of this idea that it can't move forward, but there's so much opportunity for collaboration all the way around. And I think it's just finding what your lane is. It really does come down to what space do you want to hold in whatever it is that you're doing.
And even if you have an idea, say somebody has an idea about Grocery Run Club, bring it to the organization.
Yeah.
Like maybe you're not the person that's supposed to start an organization, but if you have an idea and it fits into the lane of another organization, go to them with it. And then you have this built-in support. They'll help you find whatever you need to make it fly.
Exactly. We encourage that at Grocery Run Club. We always tell people, if you have an idea, bring it to us. And we have had some of our greatest collaborations in that way of businesses that are like, I want to help support you in this very exact way. And we're like, great. Like that's your lane. You want to bake a pastry that's specific to us and donate funds? Great. Like that's, all of those ways, there's always a way that what you want to do can fit in, whether you're starting it on your own or whether it's being incorporated to someone else's idea.
Lucy, I want to ask you, because I'm always curious with everybody's answer to this question, but at the root of everything that you do with Grocery Run Club, with your events, everything else in your life, the person that you are, what is at that root? Like what's the driving force that leads you to do all this?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think I just want to be a good human. Like, I want to do my part while I'm here on this world to leave the world a little bit better than I found it. A lot of the things that I work on are not going to change in my lifetime. Food insecurity will be there when I'm long gone. Inequities and racism will be there when I'm gone. Events will go on in a different way, but I want to make sure that I'm bringing my perspective to this while I'm doing it. And for me, it's so rooted in being a Chicago kid. Like, I'm so proud of this city. I'm born and raised here. I left for a very, very small amount of time during college, but for me, I have so much joy in this city and it brings me so much pride. And so anything that I can do to make it a little bit better or to keep people here, to keep talent here. I think we always have this idea that like we need to move to LA and we need to move to New York. And I want to tell you why you need to stay here. And so that drives so much of what I do. And I think for me, it's also understanding that in many spaces, I am the only person of a marginalized identity that kind of has these different perspectives of life. And for me to be able to be in those rooms and share that so that people can have a better understanding of what other people are facing feels really important to me, especially in the work that we're doing with Grocery Run Club, of making sure that I'm advocating for people that can't advocate for themselves in that space. So that's all of that is kind of at the root of why I do what I do.
Well, your voice and your story is so important, and I'm just so grateful to be having you on the podcast to share your story and everything that you're doing because you're such a light in this world. And so I'm just grateful to know you. So for people that are listening, what can they do to support your work? Grocery Run Club, if people want to throw an event and they can call you.
Reach out to me. But for Grocery Run Club, that's definitely like where the priority lies in terms of support right now. We love volunteers. We love financial donations. We love product donations. If you want to throw a fundraiser for us, we love that. We really are a collaborative bunch, Jorge and I. We love meeting new people and kind of knowing what people are up to. And that same sentiment goes for community organizations who are in need of help, who are like, I don't know where I'm going to get, the next round of resources that I need for my community. We want you to reach out to us on groceryrunclub.com. And on Instagram is Grocery Run Club.
Yeah.
Super easy.
I always tell people one of the easiest ways, and it's free.
Yeah,
cheap, free.
It is.
Follow on social media, promote your stuff. If people see that you're doing a fundraiser or anything online, share it. Like that's the easiest way to support people.
I think people miss that all the time. Like when people share and share and share, we see the return right away, whether it's someone that reaches out to us to send a nice message or we see an influx of donations. Like those shares really, really work. So definitely a great way to support us.
So what about people, say they don't live in Chicago, obviously they can still support your work, but if they want to emulate the work that you're doing in their own communities, what are some ways that people can do that?
Yeah, I mean, the need that's happening here is happening all over. And I think that there's a version of us everywhere. I don't want to say that what we're doing is extremely unique because that's the work of a lot of nonprofits. And so I would say find that organization that you really resonate with, that is really fitting that need that you want to solve. I think all of us have such different passions. Your passion may not be helping to solve food insecurity, but it may be, rescuing dogs. Like it may be something like that. And there's someone in your city, town that's doing something similar. If not, you're going to find that out and you're going to be able to do it on your own as well. But I think it's just figuring out where you can start and just going for it, whether you're finding that org or starting it on your own.
Lucy, I'm just so grateful to have you on the podcast. I'm so honored to just get to know more about you and Grocery Run Club and to share your story. Before I let you go, I always end this podcast on one question. So I want to ask you, if you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
Wow, that's so hard. We are stronger together. That's something that I have learned so much through Grocery Run Club, but also as just women in general. We are so supportive of each other. We always show up for one another. And I think sometimes it's so easy for us to feel like we're alone and that we're kind of in this silo doing our own thing. But when women come together and girls come together, we can make mountains move. I really do believe that. So
I love that.
message.
I've seen that in my own life in Detroit. I love seeing that here in Chicago. It's been so
Yeah.
great to get to know you and some of the other women who are doing incredible things here in the city.
Thank
But
you.
Lucy, thank you so much for being on the podcast,
Thank
and
you.
thank you for all the great work you do.
Thank you so much for having me.